Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about how to mentally prepare to go into contracting if you're an employee. Now, I've spoken to many different types of people who have come into this space or wanted to become a contractor, and it feels like a big fear, okay? Quitting is not something that comes easily to most people. And so I'm going to try to break down some strategies that you can utilize in order for you to do this a bit more comfortably. It's not an easy thing to do, like I've stated before, but there are certain things that you can do. Now, the reality is that, it's very important for you to understand that we're moving into a world, we're moving into a space that is focusing more on the portfolio career. I spoke about this in my previous video, and the portfolio career is basically, rather than pursuing a career, you are creating a career. So we're going to talk more about what that looks like from a contracting standpoint. And so if we keep it moving, the portfolio career looks like this. Okay, I spoke about this before. You've got these 6 different archetypes. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of them, but what we're focusing on is the conservative contractor. Okay, because I believe this is the space where you can get big gains financially, potentially, but also have a meaningful contribution to different organizations. In addition to that, you get the possibilities and the flexibility to work with loads of different types of people, accelerate your experience, and all those great things that you may see with management consultants. So being a contractor is quote unquote a luxury in some ways, but it's not an easy path. I don't want anyone watching this to think that this is an easy thing, or it's just quick money. It's not quick money. You have to be a professional contractor, because every single time you move into this space, you're going to be judged. Okay, there is a culture in every single organization. So you need to remember that and bear that to mind. Like, don't take it for granted by any means. Now, the next thing I want to focus on is looking at these different sort of like topics. Okay, so we're going to talk about the contracting mentality, the clarity you need to dive into contracting, the strategies you can start employing as an employee, as a permanent full-time employee, and further checks that you can make. Okay, so let's get into it. Now, some of you may be familiar with this video, and if you're not, that's perfectly fine. This is not an ego statement here, but I produced a video back in the day called How to Become an Independent Consultant. An independent consultant is what I call a contractor. Now, I did this video because I felt like there were a lot of people who were being a bit cryptic about the whole contracting thing, not really sharing the information. Now, luckily for me, back in, I think it was 2021, around February or March, I got my first contracting gig. And for about 18 months, I pretty much stayed in the same organization, but, changed up a bit based on the fact that COVID was a big deal. So I definitely had beginner's luck, I would like to think, but we'll see. I mean, I'm 2 years into this industry and I'm learning lots. Maybe it's not beginner's luck. Maybe there's more to this, and I'm learning that there are seasons to this, and you'll see that in the next video. But recently, I decided to hand in my notice for one of my latest contracts. Why did I do that? Well, I just felt like, the values were changing for the specific thing that I was focusing on, and I needed something else. So for the past 4 to 5 months, I've been focusing purely on my coaching, my business, and everything else. This is a beautiful thing to have, to know that I was able to do all of those things. Now, the reality is, not everyone's necessarily going to be in that position, especially if they're not managing their finances the right way, or if they don't have a partner, or they're not set up in that sort of space. And so it's just really trying to give you a flavor of how this can work. Sometimes you may stop doing certain contracts because your time's up. Maybe there may be well-being or mental things that come into play. There are loads of things to consider, okay? Now, looking at this, now thinking about all of this stuff, obviously I was feeling a certain way and all this kind of stuff there. I was smart about what I was doing. So the one message I want you to take home is that when you fall into this space, you need to be your own financial manager. You need to be practical. You need to be sensible when it comes to this specific space. You have to be. Otherwise, it's just going to make you unsettled, okay? Luckily, I have my coaching and mentoring business. Okay, it's not full-fledged yet, but it is making me income, which I'm happy about. And if you remember the different archetypes we're talking about within the portfolio career, I'm definitely sat between the conservative contractor and the diversified personal brand. Like, I'm definitely, between those two. So again, let's keep it moving so we can give you some context. Now, thinking about sort of like my sort of situation, this is my LinkedIn, okay? Thinking about my situation, I positioned myself a certain way, okay? I remember putting out a post on LinkedIn basically saying, I focus on change management, project management, and I have a focus usually in public health, X, Y, and Z, okay? But the roles that I was doing was centered around operations and relationship lead management. So this was during the COVID times for the community testing team. There's also workforce and resourcing lead, again, during the COVID times. And there's also project management for various different areas, okay? So these were the sorts of things that I personally was doing. Now, I had a bit of a health slant, so that kind of helped me. And I had 11 years experience within the NHS. And this was mainly within London-based and nationally based head offices within the NHS. So I say this to say, think about how you can position yourself. What does that look like for you? And I want to illustrate this point even more. So if we move into the next bit, this is really focusing on, again, getting you to think about, what does contracting offer to me? Or what can I offer to contracting, should I say? What experiences do I have? And what do they say about me? Am I ready for the highs and lows of contracting? I just spoke about all of that stuff before. Like, are you ready for that? And do you have the discipline to, again, have that financial acumen, management, behaviors, habits, routines, all of that kind of stuff? These are big questions you need to answer honestly. You have to answer them honestly. And so once you have that you need to start thinking about the certain mentality that contracting has, okay? It's not about being in this whole state of survival mode. You need to thrive. You need to be able to be a professional. You know, economically, when it comes to the population, you're going to be anywhere between 1 to 5 or 1 to 10% of the population in terms of earning potential. That's a privilege to have. Okay, this is something you can't take for granted. You have to really look at this opportunity and attack it in the right way. And this is why I say you are an independent consultant as opposed to just a contractor. You need to have a professionalism about it, because that professionalism is going to help you financially, but also gain more opportunities and help you be seen in a certain light. And this is what I really want to hit home. Don't take this stuff for granted. Because as I stated before, you know, this whole sort of like period is being affected by so many different things, whether this is AI or toxic leadership and cultures or the Great Resignation, all of this kind of stuff there. This stuff is disrupting how the current career ladder is being pursued right now. And so contracting is the breeding ground for developing the right mindset for this new economy. I truly believe that is the case. So bear this in mind when thinking about this whole contracting space. So again, contracting may be the answer you need, okay? But if you haven't noticed already, a lot of sort of like personal brands on your social medias and all this kind of stuff there fell into contracting. They may not say it, but it's really clear that that's what they've done. I'm not sure why they don't say it. Maybe they just say it in passing. Maybe it's not something that is of interest to them to talk about. That's fair enough. But a lot of them do that. And what it does is that it gives them time and it gives them money and a sense of flexibility to do what they're doing. And this is why they've been able to just run with it. You know, there's somebody that I was helping get into the whole contracting space, and she noticed it herself. She's like, all of the big players I'm playing with have gone into contracting or at least doing their own thing. So this is the mentality we need to have. So if this is something of interest to you, then yeah, you need to get into this space, 100%. So one thing I want to caveat this by though is if you're single or if you're in a situation where, you know, money's quite difficult, you need to just be extremely vigilant. Just play your cards right. And I'm not going to encourage things heavily if your circumstances are very different. I have to remember that my situation is unique and it's not representative of everyone. Let's move into the next section. So here we're focusing on the clarity you need in order to dive into this space. Okay. Now, why do you want to become a contractor? Is a really important question. Really important question because, you know, it's becoming the norm to like pigeonhole yourself into one specific niche. And this niche could be your career. Okay. But that's risky business now. They say that a jack of all trades is a master of none. But if you see the completion of the whole quote, there is this element of, well, actually, it's better that you have more skills under your belt because that gives you more opportunities. Now, it doesn't say it like that. I'll probably throw a quote underneath so you can see what it actually says. People are realizing that it is more risky to just focus on a traditional career path and not sort of like open themselves up to different opportunities. That's what this is showing, especially with this whole rise in a portfolio career. So again, contracting gives you that opportunity, especially because you don't have to start a new business or you don't have to like try to do all these things. Yes, there is paperwork and admin you need to do, but it's not that heavy compared to trying to set up your own solopreneur business or agency or training provider, whatever it may be. That takes a lot of time, a lot of admin, other people, money, etc., etc. Yes, this stuff is also included, but it's not a heavy cost. The main barrier is quitting. So this is something to just really think about. So what are some of the reasons that people come up with when it comes to this whole sort of like contracting space of why they want to get into it? Well, let's look at this. So I'm not getting the progress I need from my current employment, or I believe contracting will provide me with better opportunities. Contracting will help me better climb the career ladder. This is definitely true because the responsibility that you have is accelerated. And so they push you in positions or put you in positions or provide opportunities for you to do things that are of a more strategic and or leadership nature. That's if you take it. So this is the beauty of contracting. Some more things here. I have a deep, insatiable feeling to start this career. It will allow me to be more flexible with my time. I want the space to lean into other interests. I definitely had a deep, insatiable feeling. So it was that sort of thing where it was like, I needed to do it. I just knew it made sense for me in terms of that flexibility and all that kind of stuff there. So think about what that looks like for you. I want to get paid much more for what I do. I want the flexibility to leave when I want. I want to experience a variety of projects. I want more control of my future. These things are all true. One thing I will say though is that don't see this as, oh, I can just leave whenever. Yes, that's true. You exercise that right. But you have to understand how this affects you and your image and your personal brand and the professional feel that you're trying to develop and perceive. And so with this in mind, these things are all true, but it comes with caution as well. Remember, it is pivotal that you don't come into this game as an amateur. You come in as a professional who goes in and does the job. You don't want to be treated unfairly, of course, and you don't want to be in toxic relationship, leadership environments or cultures, but you do definitely want to, again, be the professional. I'll continue to say that until, you guys really understand what I'm trying to say. Now, word of warning, you can't get into this space. Well, you can, but I'm saying it's best that you don't just get into the space because of money. You need to get into the space due to some sort of real value. Like, why are you getting into the space? What are you trying to achieve as a person? And I say this because I know for a fact, if I stayed in certain contracts because of the money, I would not be happy. I'd be burnt out, or my well-being won't be the best, or whatever it may be. So this is why I highlighted those things before, because you can exercise those rights. So it can't just be about money. It needs to be about something more. Okay. Think about what values are driving you to do this specific thing. Okay. And this will help you make decisions moving forward. Once you know your reason in terms of why you're looking into this space, there's no looking back. It's very clear to you. So the next section is focusing on the strategies you can use as a full-time permanent employee. Okay. So this is the part that you can start utilizing today. The first question I want to ask you is, what is your superpower? And I know this sounds kind of like, oh, okay, whatever. Well, what is your superpower? What are the things that make you stand out? Okay, so this is based on your experiences, your skills, your expertise, your specialism, whatever it may be. So if we use me as an example, there's a whole host of different things that I had done before in the past that I can utilize to help me position myself for success. Let's look at those examples, okay? So here as an example, obviously I could have said this whole thing and I never did, but this is just highlighting the point. Public sector healthcare change manager with specialisms in public health commissioning and digital integrations in the UK. Now I'm not going to read through all of them, but if you funnel it down to point 3, I could say I'm a public sector healthcare change manager. That feels a bit more neater to say. If I go down to the bottom one, I could say I'm a project manager. Now, of course, that's quite sort of like lean. So you need to think to yourself, what is the best balance when it comes to talking about this stuff? When you're speaking to agents or other contractors or opportunities that may arise. Now you may want to add other sort of like things like qualifications to show that you are strengthened within these spaces. So this could be things like PMP or Prince 2, Lean Six Sigma. It could also be things like Agile or MSP, change management, coaching and mentoring, practitionership, etc., etc. You may also want to talk about different organizations that you're part of, okay, memberships, etc., etc. This is all stuff that will help you stand out. But really thinking about it, I think there's a bit of a sweet spot. And what I mean by this is, if you focus on these sort of like 4 areas, sector, industry, role, and specialism, or maybe even sector, industry and role, or maybe even sector specialism and role, then you're in a better position to, again, clearly explain and talk about what you do, okay? I'll give you an example here. So this is really the formula. Sector plus industry plus role equals contracting niche. That's what it is. So public sector, healthcare, project manager. That's clear. So agents know that this is specifically what I can focus on. Now, there is this question around, specialist versus generalist. All I can say is you need to be able to flex between the two. Now, if we think about what I was talking about before, when looking at all of this stuff, number 1 is hyper specialized, but number 6 is general. So really, there are going to be times in the market where you're going to have to be very specific when you're talking to people, but you're also going to have to be quite general as well. And that's usually down to economic factors, changes in the market, all of that kind of stuff. They're in the seasons of contracting. Again, I'll talk about this in future videos. So bear this in mind. What is your generalist approach and what is your specialist approach? Now, there are definitely sort of like industries that are doing well right now when it comes to hiring contractors. And that is specifically around healthcare, tech, the environment, HR, all of that kind of stuff, finance. These are key things that I keep on seeing again and again and again in terms of opportunities and job boards. So bear that in mind. I may be completely wrong, and it all comes down to your niche and who you speak to and all that kind of stuff there. But I know this stuff has been quite favorable, especially for, the generalist role, such as a project manager, etc., etc. But it doesn't mean these other opportunities are not available for other types of people. So just bear this in mind. Now, of course, you need to think about your CV. Your CV is key to all of this stuff. And so I've done a video on CV writing before, so you can check that out. But you really want to look at your CV and think of ways in which you can improve it. Now, in essence, this is essentially what you want to be focusing on. This is just a quick list, okay? So ensure that you have the right type of font and size. Make sure it's a wide margin. Forget all of these graphics and all this kind of stuff. It's just nobody wants to see that, and there are certain algorithms that pick up information that makes it easier for you to send over this CV as well and get it to be read. You want to make sure that you have your personal details right at the top, and every single section is divided by dividers. You want to have a section of your personal profile, which is highlighting your specific expertise, your core skills, and what you're looking for. You want 6 to 10 key relevant skills to the specific things that you're applying for. You also want relevant experience, okay? So talk about that stuff, specifically projects and achievements that you've had. Again, my video talks about how you can break that down and what the structure looks like for that. You also want to talk about additional experience that you may have, but you don't need to go into detail. You want to have an education section that highlights your vocational and formal education, and any references, again, you basically say available upon request. That was a lot of stuff there, okay? It's a lot of stuff, but I think that's enough for you to know how to structure your CV. And of course, there are services that you can use. So obviously many of you know about ChatGPT. I've done a video on this and how to utilize ChatGPT, but you can use this in the interim to generate ideas or give you a template or actually create the CV for you if you want to. So if you want to check out that video, how you can utilize that for yourself. In addition to that, I've used services before such as Purple CV that have professionals who can write this stuff for you. Okay, so again, there's a link below that you can check out in order for you to utilize that for yourself. So these are things and options that you can use. There are no excuses. Like there's free options, there's paid options, there's professional options. There's so many. So utilize them and just get your CV ready. And I'm saying all of this stuff for you to do in order whilst you're in your full-time permanent role. Now, the next thing to think about is your LinkedIn profile. You want to make sure this is on point. Now, I'm not saying that mine is the best, okay? I'm not even going to go down that route. But you do need to think about like how you need to position your LinkedIn profile, okay? Because this is going to be a perfect and important tool for where people are going to be reaching out to you and communicating with you and judging you, so to speak, okay? So you want to make sure that every single section is completed fully. I don't want to hear, oh, I haven't done this. No, do it fully, okay? And it needs to be pretty much synonymous to your CV. You want to add a worthy picture to your profile. So, this was actually taken from a video. This wasn't even a photo. I used removebackground.bg on Google to remove it. You can even use Canva if you've got a premium version of Canva and remove the background and add that on if you can't do all of that stuff and put it on a white background. You can stand behind a white wall and take a picture and sort it out that way. There are so many ways you can do it, okay? So think about that stuff as well. It needs to be done on a profile pro camera or your phone. It doesn't really matter. You want to make sure you have a really enticing header image, okay? It needs to fit your personal brand, your feel, all of that kind of stuff there. So again, you can get this on Canva if you want. So Canva is a great way for you to produce this stuff. I've got a link below that has some templates on this stuff. You want to make sure that you add everyone relevant from your connections. Okay, so this could be from your phone book, from your email, from whatever it may be. So add as many people as possible. Once you have 500 plus connections, not follows, and follows relate to, those who have a creator profile, again, that positions you as somebody. This is all kind of like personal brand stuff, but it's all important for this stuff. And this is stuff that you can start doing now. So make sure that you've really filled up your connections and utilized them. There is a limit. If you exceed that limit, then you won't be able to add connections for a day or a week. I've definitely had that before. Okay. Ask for endorsements. Some people feel a bit funny about this, but if you can get recommendations in your profile from line managers, people you've worked with, people you've even coached and mentored, this is all good stuff, okay? So find opportunities to get those recommendations, those testimonials, etc., etc. Now, if you're trying to develop your personal brand because you're really invested in this whole portfolio career and you're trying to develop a side hustle or you want to become a diversified personal brand, then this is an opportunity to maybe post, okay? Think about a structure. I've spoken about this in the previous video, so you can check that out. And this is good because it shows that you are a thought leader and you kind of have an opinion, a professional opinion. You may want to share other people's stuff. You may want to share your own stuff. You definitely want to engage with people's stuff because this is what, again, sets you apart from different people. So these are all different sort of things to consider and think about. It's about consistency. It's about having that look and feel. And it's about making sure that, you have a profile that you're very proud of. Okay, so those are things to consider. Now we're focusing on speaking to people. Okay, this is I can't talk about how important this section is. You need to be able to speak to people. Okay, the right types of people. And the right types of people look like this. You want to speak to other contractors. You want to speak to an accountant. You want to speak to recruiters or agencies. And you want to speak to people you've worked with before or are currently working with. Okay, so with contractors, they'll give you insights into their journey and what you should expect. Okay, so you can find them in your own workplaces. You can find them on LinkedIn, in your connections, your environments, events, etc., etc. Speak to contractors who are in the space. Really good source of mentorship. There's also agents or recruiters. So they will give you a realistic idea of what the market's looking like. And if they're interested in you as a person, they'll sit down with you and kind of quiz you in a way. So all the stuff that we did before becomes even more important because you know what to say to them. Okay. And so this is where your CV needs to be on point. This is where you need to be clear of your specialist approach and your generalist approach. These are really important things, but it's also an opportunity for you to ask questions. Okay, you can ask these people questions in terms of what to expect, what they need, how they've seen the market, etc., etc. You've also got accountants. Okay, accountants are so crucial to this process. They were so helpful to me because they give you a great idea of the money that you're going to make. They can develop an illustration for you. They can talk about tax with you. If they're a FCSA accounting firm or agency, then they can sort out the stuff from an inside standpoint or an outside standpoint. Okay, so if you're inside IR35, you're going to be working under an umbrella or PAYE. If you're outside IR35, then it's most likely going to be your own limited or somebody else's limited company. So they can address all of this stuff. And so maybe you want to ask them to give you an illustration based on a day rate of £500 a day. That gives you a solid sort of view in terms of what to expect. The other thing is old and current colleagues. Now, it's important to speak to them because again, they usually have opportunities under their belt. Sometimes they've heard something. They're like, oh, you never guess what? John spoke about this opportunity here and he spoke to Sally and Sally spoke to, Margaret and apparently they're doing X, Y, and Z. Yeah, get on it. Sometimes they're like, oh, I'm actually hiring people. Are you interested? Are you available now? Maybe they know somebody else. So that's how it worked for me initially. Really, really crucial stuff. I can't stress how important it is to keep connections with people, whether you know them or don't know them, but especially from people you've worked with or work with currently. So bear that in mind. Don't write people off and try to do this whole I'm doing it in secret thing. Of course, you have to bear in mind your culture as well. The next thing you want to do is sign up to different job boards. Now, I say this because this is the best opportunity for you to get contacted by so many different types of recruiters, because what happens is once you sign up, then you get connected to these different recruiters and they start contacting you. Okay. Now, what you want to do first is you want to make sure that your profile is on point. Fill out every single section. Again, going back to your specialist and generalist approach, you want to make sure this is clear. Be clear about the industry that you're part of, be clear about the sector that you're part of, and be clear about the role specifically, okay? So this is a great opportunity to do this. Now, once you go onto these job boards, such as, again, this is an example using CV Library, you want to apply filters to it, okay? So I've shown this here on the actual diagram, but what you want to do is maybe, for example, put in the role, put in the location, you know, how much you would like to make. Now, they're not always going to show whether it's a contract or not. So when it comes to like annual salary, you want to put a minimum between 80 to 100K plus. Sounds like a lot. I don't want to scare anyone, but this just kind of highlights what that would be equivalent to if you're making a day rate. And again, those things will show up. That usually is the case, okay? So you want to filter this stuff and just play around with it, like look through it and just get familiar with what sort of things, you know, pop up. And if you're bold enough, apply for these things. Apply for these things. Like, don't be scared to apply for them, because you want to get familiar with talking to these people on the phone. You know, for places like CV Library, you can even pay for a booster for £10 for 30 days for your thing to be seen by more people. I've used this before in the past. I think this was in the last couple of months. And my CV was definitely shown way more. I could sense it, especially during a tumultuous time, or threatening time, as I call it, okay? So these are things to definitely consider, okay? Now, the places that I have used are on the screen here. So in order of preference, so to speak, I would say CV Library I use the most, PSR I probably use next best, then Reader, then JobServe, okay? But they're all pretty much the same apart from PSR. Now, PSR stands for Public Sector Resourcing, and their government contracts, they usually have great rates, and they have a really sort of stringent process as well. So that's something to consider as well. You can also apply for different Big Four contracts as well. So, you know, places like PwC and Deloitte and EY and all these places, and KPMG, they offer contracting opportunities as well. So if you want to have that personal brand for that certain space, you can apply for these things. And if you're successful, that would be great for you as well. So think about this stuff. There are other sort of like places, which I'm not going to name because I don't think it's fair, that kind of quiz you before you can even apply for certain contracts. Now, for me personally, I don't have time for that. So I kind of avoid that stuff. You don't have to like create red tape unnecessarily. So those are things to consider. Now, moving into this section, the final section, we want to focus on final checks. So really there's a lot here to think about when it comes to final checks. But again, you have to remember, like, when pursuing this, you need to be clear about what you can and can't do. Okay, really important stuff. So focusing on this, there are two final checks that I think are important. One of them is knowing about the sort of like workplace you're in right now. Be clear about the notice period that you have. Be clear about the process for actually handing in your notice and all that kind of stuff there. Okay. You also want to be clear about your relationship with your line manager, what they're willing to do. Sometimes they're happy to, you know, extend your leave based on when you find a contract. Sometimes they're like, nope, you need to leave. It just really depends. You don't want to create any animosity at all. You want to create this sense of professionalism. So if there is any tension at all, play the game, keep your head up high, don't burn any bridges, and please trust me on this, because you never know when you might bump into this person again. Okay. The other thing to consider is finances. Okay. Now, a lot of people have said to me, and they come to me and said that, well, it's easy for you to say, you know, but it's difficult for me to save for the moment. I can't save an emergency fund and do all of these different things and all that kind of jazz there. And based upon analysis, this is based on two different things. And I'm not going to go into character behavior and all that kind of stuff there. I'm going to keep it very practical and upfront. It's either based on the fact that expenses are high or income is low, whether that is deliberate or not, or whether that is intentional or not, or whether that is habitual or not. This is the situation. So a combination of the two doesn't help. And all I can say to you is that if you are confident about evidencing your value to the marketplace, and you follow the steps that I've spoken about before, and you're sure that this is something that you need to do, then you need to get creative. You need to find ways to be creative. Like, maybe you need to speak to your line manager and understand what type of flexibility that they have. This is why you really need to know the process. Maybe you need to start chopping down on expenses more so that you can prepare yourself for that cushion just in case. Maybe you're possibly out of work for the next 2 to 12 weeks. Who knows? I mean, that doesn't really happen. Usually people find contracts, you know, quite rapidly based on their niche and stuff, but this is not a guarantee. This is just what I am saying. Maybe you just need to quit like I did and not really have much of a backup, so to speak. I'm not telling you to do any of these things. All I'm saying to you is that you have options in front of you. If you truly want to do this, if this is a deep feeling, then you need to find ways to make it work. Because once you get onto the other side, you'll thank yourself for it. I would like to think so anyway. And so moving forward, like when thinking about an emergency fund, you want to make sure that you have 3+ months saved at least. That was a lot of stuff. This was a really in-depth session. Now, of course, if this is something you're truly and deeply interested in getting into, then of course, I've got my course, The Independent Consultant, a guide for becoming a contractor within the UK. Now, this is a comprehensive look in terms of, again, how to get into contracting, my journey, the steps you need to take, the difference between the different tax systems, etc., etc., etc. So if this is something that you're interested in, then make sure you click the link below so you can check it out for yourself. Now, to summarize all of this stuff, this has been a really comprehensive guide, but really to look at it, it's number one, your mentality to contracting needs to be an unwavering one, okay? You've got to be in it to win it. The second thing is be clear on why you want to come into contracting. Like, what value do you provide to the marketplace, okay? Because if you understand why you want to get into it, then that will drive you to take the actions that you need to take. The third thing is employ the 5 strategies that I spoke about, whether it's your CV, your LinkedIn, or applying for roles, etc., or speaking to different people. Just try these things because, again, it will make you more comfortable and more familiar with the process. And finally, you have to ensure that you've made the right relevant checks, whether this is around policy, process, etc., etc. So hopefully this has given you a clear perspective in terms of the mentality you need to build and what you can do as a full-time permanent employee to get into this space. Now, if you want to see more videos centered around positive psychology, portfolio careers, and life management, then make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And as always, my friends, understand, reach, and expand. Peace.